talking about Putin and his recent press conference. He said that most probably US is behind the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline. He goes beyond that and he says he's ready to build up its relations with the United States.
Well, Nima, he's riding high, okay? Contrary to Joe Biden claiming 2.5 months ago or so that Russia had already lost in Ukraine. It's just the opposite. You know, it's like 180 degrees opposite. Russia has already won. Now, Biden has to deal with that, but so does Putin. What does he do? I think he hopes that he can continue to attrition of Ukrainian forces in a way that doesn't raise a real bad signal that NATO or the US has to come in bigger than it already has. He knows that that when negotiations happen, they will have to happen with the United States. I mean, Zelensky is just a puppet of the United States. So, what does this really mean? It means that he's confident in a way that he could not have been confident this time last year, when it appeared that the Ukrainian forces were making gains. Turned out to be a strategic defeat by the Russian forces, and they came back en masse. He's got more of an army. He's got ammunition. He's got weaponry that the West does not have, supersonic or hypersonic weapons. Okay, so the problem is that he can't count on the United States being sensible, or even rational, or even sane. Now, that's not my inference. That comes out of Putin's own mouth. Now, just 2 days ago, he had that major 4-hour Q&A, okay? And last year, in October, the end of October, he had a similar Q&A. And he was asked by one of the reporters there, Mr. President Putin, how do you look at the notion that Washington is picking a fight with China at the same time as it vying with us, with the U.S., with Russia in Ukraine? What do you think about that? And Putin, he's always extemporaneous, you know. He says, "Well, I'll tell you, I used to think that there was some subtle plan here that that I didn't quite understand, but I no longer think so." They're crazy. It's a function of arrogance and a feeling of impunity, period, end quote. Direct quote from what Putin said. Okay, now, if that's how Putin reads it, and there's ample evidence for them being crazy, taking on 2 conflicts and maybe a third in East Asia, my God, a trifecta, for God's sake, And when the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen's asked, well, can you finance all this? She said, no problem. We got lots of money. Where'd they get the money? Borrowed from China, I guess. Anyhow, crazy? Well, it doesn't matter. I agree with what Putin did in describing our policy. But it doesn't matter what McGovern believes. It matters what Putin believes. And so what I'm saying here is simply that he's got to be on this. He's got to be on tenterhooks. He's got to be on full alert. Because if Joe Biden, if he can't string 2 sentences together without a teleprompter, if he can't find his way off a stage, what's going to happen when somebody says, Joe, we need to use a little mini nuke. They're not very dangerous. Only 1/5 the power of Hiroshima and so forth. And he can't remember the codes, but we remember the codes. There are the codes. I mean, this is not anything that McGovern just dredged up. This Kremlin planners have to think about these things, okay? And not only their intelligence operatives, their intelligence analysts, but their military. And the military, doesn't get involved in intentions. It gets involved in capabilities, okay? And when they tell Mr. Putin, look, the U.S. can do this, that, and the other thing, and looks like Biden might authorize that to save himself from losing in Ukraine, from losing in the election, and perhaps from losing his freedom if Trump comes in and puts him in jail. There's lots of evidence for him. I mean, might he be tempted to do that? It doesn't matter. We have to be prepared. So all I'm saying is that as vibrant, healthy, and self-confident as Putin appears, and he is riding high on his successes, not only in Ukraine, but in the rest of the world, to say that the U.S. has isolated Russia is sort of like a bad joke. What's happened is you have U.S. and the rest of the lily white West being isolated by the rest of the world, basically, people of color plus Russia, okay? So the worrying thing for me is, I've watched this for a long time, since the early 60s, professionally. And never has it been so unstable, so tentative for a Russian leader to look at what's going on in Washington and see not only the equities, political equities to protect, but the personal stake that these guys have in. I mean, I've said this before, I'll say just one very briefly. If Biden is able to look at this and his folks around him say, well, look, we can't lose in Ukraine. And Biden said, well, yeah, but we don't have any more 155 millimeter shells. And they hear, that's okay. And then Biden, if he had an ounce of sense, would say, well, now, why is it that we don't have, you tell me that Russia is going to take over not only Ukraine, but Poland and the Baltic states, and we'd go, well, how come we don't have any 155 millimeter shells to protect against it? Oh well, it's so transparently false that the Russians intend to do anything other than to make Ukraine neutral and safe for the rest of Russia. So, so these guys will be saying, well, yeah, we gotta paint a very bleak picture here, and we may have to use something special. Now, let me throw a little scare into all of you. Why did Zelensky go to Washington all alone? I mean, one-on-one. Why did he have, he had people with him, but why do you have these sessions with Biden one-on-one? Now, the conventional wisdom is, well, it wasn't just that. No, it was he wanted to convince Congress to approve more aid. Well, they knew before he ever got on a plane that wasn't going to happen. So why did he go there? Well, my fear, and if this is 50% possibility, here's my fear. Biden, under the impact of these neocons and the national security apparatus called the deep state, the ones that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, they get Biden, and as people say, look, Zelensky, President Zelensky, here's the plan, okay? Now, we don't want this to get out. That's why we wanted you here, eye to eye, okay? We don't want to put this in a cable or an email or on the telephone. This is what we're going to do, okay, to turn things around, because we have to turn things around. We want you, not Zelensky, not all these other guys that are fighting for, but we want you. You're our guy, and here's what's going to happen, okay? Now, you probably want to know from me what's going to happen. I don't know, but my guess is it'll be a false flag of some kind, okay? A false flag attack, which the U.S. is so good at, which is what I've been talking about in Syria and other things, or some other dastardly thing that would be able to be used with the American people to justify even worse, not depleted uranium, not these bombs that scatter pellets all over the place, but maybe a mini nuke. Okay, would the Americans people support that? The American people are so brainwashed on Russia and Putin. Brainwashed is the right word, that I don't know. They might support that if they're ginned up with the kind of propaganda that they've been fed for the last 8 or 9 years now. I mean, that's what Russiagate did. Despite it being just spurious and culpable on the part of the security services that adduced all this evidence of Russian hacking and all that, we all know that's not true now. But the American people don't know that, okay? And they've been conditioned to thinking the worst of Russia, and those are the consequential effects of Russiagate. So that's my fear, and Putin's a pretty smart guy. He's going to be around for a while, and in my view, that's a good thing. He's been pretty moderate. He's been pretty self-effacing. He said, look, you're right. We should have taken over the Donbass back in 2014, right after the coup in Kiev. They asked us to. They declared independence, Donetsk and Lugansk. And I said, no, work it out with the Westerners, work it out in Minsk. And the Minsk Accords came, and what happened? Well, we know what happened to the Minsk Accords. The Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, Hollande, who was the president of France, they've all admitted that this is just a delaying advice because the Ukrainian army wasn't worth a damn back in 2014. And look at them now, says Angela Merkel. We built them up with NATO training and NATO weapons, and they're ready to go in 2021. So, it's just so disturbing that the American people don't know the half of this. And that's why I make myself available, tired as I am today, to discuss this with your program, Nima, in hopes that it will get around to at least some people. And I think we have to keep trying. And we have to realize that one of my favorite quotes is from a newspaper guy who said, you're going to lose, and then you're going to lose again. But someday you're going to win. And you may not be around to see that, but that's okay, because meanwhile, you'll have done your part to win, or to at least bring some justice, some tzedakah, some justice in the tradition of the Abrahamic religions, Jewish religion, not Zionism, Christians with Jesus Christ, and the prophet. All of them share the same values. And the last thing I'll say here is that when Condoleezza Rice under George Bush decided we have a really good idea to have an election in Palestine, right? Okay. The Israelis said, no, we're not ready for it. No, don't do that. You might not like the outcome. No, we're going to have it. We're democratic. We're going to have that. Hamas won hands down. They beat that corrupt PLA or PLO hands down. They beat them really, really bad. Okay. That was 2005, 2006. Why? Why was Hamas so much more popular? I'll tell you why. Why do you have so many hospitals? Why do they take care of the poor? Hamas takes care of the widow, the orphan, and the refugee. And they have an arm that I don't condone in terms of violence, but the basic thing is that Hamas has the support of the people. And the latest polls indicate that among the Palestinians on the West Bank, as well as in Gaza, they still retain the support of the majority of the Palestinian people. And what's new is the Palestinian people are going to have a hand now in what happens here, no matter how grim, no matter how violent Netanyahu tends to be. And we know how violent he has been. And let's just hope that Joe Biden, if he doesn't see a human interest in stopping the carnage, that he's moved politically to say, well, this is not going to be any votes next November. Hate to be so cynical, but if that's what it takes, we need to impress that upon him. But this is not going to work out very well. It's going to be what the Chinese used to call come to a no good end.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says that this rise that is happening in the energy prices is the consequence of Russian imperialism. Do they really believe in Russian imperialism?
I spent some considerable time in Germany and have continuing good friends there. And I asked them, I said, do German people really believe that anyone other than the U.S. Blew up Nord Stream pipeline and that they should blame that for the high energy prices and so forth? And the answer I get is only half. The propaganda is so thick here. It's worse than the United States in some ways. Hard to believe. That's what I get. Scholz is going to not long for this world. I mean, politically, he is losing support left and right, literally left and right. And the new Linke party, which is just being formed now, they're going to have a voice in what happens in Germany. That'll be a good thing because far from the Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD, the hard right, they have their heads screwed on right. And Sarah Wagenknecht is somebody who I think would talk some peace, some sense into them. So I would give the Scholz government just a couple more months to live on. I would think there would have to be a change. The Germans are already fed up. And with that change, I just hope that they can finally, at the end, they can grow up, okay? Now, when I'm in Germany and I make these speeches, my German friends, Ray, don't tell us to grow up. People don't like to be told to grow up. They say, well, look, I can accept you're acting like children right after the war, like adolescents a decade or two later. But I can't accept the fact that you still can't stand on your own 2 feet when the U.S. blows up the pipeline that is giving you cheap gas from Russia just to prevent you from having decent relationship with. Don't you understand what's going on here? Who's the victim here? How can you let your chancellor stand next to Joe Biden? And Joe Biden saying the Nord Stream pipeline is not going through. We can do that, okay? And Scholz is asked by this wonderful Reuters correspondent who speaks fluent German. She said, Herr Kanzler, was halten Sie davon? Mr. Chancellor, what do you think about that? And he says, and then he says, what do I say in these circumstances? Yeah, we do everything together. We do everything. There's nothing we do important that we don't do together. Now, there it is, right on the record. Why is it that the Germans don't ask, Herr Scholz, did you do the Nord Stream pipeline together? Did Biden not tell you when you were together how he intended to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline? He didn't. Well, did you remonstrate with him when it happened? No. So the guy is the epitome of a vassal. And the sad thing is, in 1945, do the math there. Was it almost 80 years that they can't grow up? Well, maybe under the pain of energy prices this winter and the fact that a lot of their industry is imploding, maybe the Germans will finally find a backbone to act in a way not similar to what happened in 1933. Good author that I know talked about sheepish submissiveness is what characterized the advent of the Nazi regime. Nobody objected, not the Catholic parties, not the Social Democrats. They all said, "Oh, too dangerous." Well, dangerous now. And your initial question there about Putin saying, "Oh, we're open to negotiations with the United States. Would like to have a better relationship." Well, that's just makes good sense, for God's sake. You can't live in the world without having a good relationship with the United States, without expending all kinds of money on arms. And this has been their consistent. I told you what Putin wrote in the New York Times back on the 12th of September 2013. So they'd like to have a modest modicum of trust. I don't know how they feel about Trump coming in. I thought I'd never hear myself saying this, but could Trump be any worse? I mean, maybe this time the powers that be would be forced to let Trump have a more decent relationship with Russia, if that's what he really wanted. I mean, they put the kibosh on that. Maybe he could do it this time. So I can't see that Biden, well, I won't say any more about that. It's just that we're in a very critical period here. The Russians are taking the high road. We're willing to talk to the United States. At the same time, they're saying no longer is the United States our partner. For the longest time, you remember, Nima, they said our partner is the United States and Western Europe, but no longer our partners. They say sometimes our former partners, but now they're saying, look, you guys are calling us enemies, okay? We don't like that. We don't want to be enemies with you, but we're prepared. And last thing, don't think that being between two oceans is going to save you this time. It's not. High-level statements, okay? That's pretty bitter, but I think what they're afraid of is that these neocons, these sophomores, these unwashed people next to Biden would say, well, yeah, let's try this little mini nuke in Europe. And I am fixated on that because that's the fact that I say that and think that it's possible is something new. And I've been around for a really long time. You probably could tell that, can't you? So I just hope that reason will prevail, that the Middle East doesn't blow up in a way that the U.S. feels it needs to land those Marines from the Africa carrier and so forth. And that finally, Putin will let Biden down gracefully. He won't go to the Dnieper River this year, maybe next. But I'll say one more thing, because it's a tangible thing. Way back 14 months ago, on October 27th, to be precise, Putin was at the last such 4-hour marathon Q&A, okay? And a journalist said, Mr. President, I really would like to go to Odessa. I have travel plans. And I would like to know, it'll probably be 2 years before I can go, but should I apply for a Ukrainian or for a Russian visa? Pretty cute, huh? Maybe that was staged. I don't know. But Putin's response was really interesting. He said, look, Odessa, oh, a beautiful city with terrific tradition from Catherine the Great, an artistic masterpiece. It could be what he called a яблоко раздора. Яблоко is apple, okay? Раздор is conflict. It's You remember the Trojan Wars, the apple of discord. It could be a Yablaka Razdora, or it could be, and I've copied this down here, a symbol of conflict resolution. A symbol of conflict resolution. And they went on, we are ready to negotiate. It is true that the final word belongs to Washington. It's very easy for them to send the appropriate signal to Kiev to seek a peaceful solution. That will do it. Period. End quote. Putin, October 27th, last year, 2022. Now, that was as broad a hint as I can imagine coming from Putin. I'm not sure that anyone in the intelligence apparatus read this or watched it or did the kind of work that we used to do, okay? Or even mentioned it to people like Sullivan or Blinken, because, that the Russians are willing to negotiate. Last year when Ukraine was riding high with those advances in Ukraine, okay. So it probably was never taken up seriously, but there it was. I think there'd still be a way out here, even though this time, 2 days ago, during the most recent Q&A, Putin said this: the southeastern part of Ukraine has always been pro-Russian. It was incorporated into Russia as a result of the Russo-Turkish Wars. Odessa is a Russian city. Everybody knows that. We know that, end quote. All right, what's he saying now? Well, that's pretty strong. The inference is, or the implication is, that you missed your chance last year. We're going to take Odessa and thereby make Ukraine a landlocked country, which will be a farm for the rest of Europe. They'll have no access to the rest of the world through the Black Sea. We can do that, okay? It's always been a Russian city. We know this. Everybody knows this. So what I think the deal was back then was Odessa's on both sides of the mouth of the Dnieper River, okay? So the Russians take the eastern side, the Ukrainians take the western side, and you manage it jointly, like Trieste after one of the world wars. You make a deal here where commerce can come into the Black Sea from Ukraine. That way, Ukraine can be a viable country, okay? Now, I think that's what Putin had in mind. Whether that's still on the table or whether the U.S. even knows that this is one of the possibilities is problematical because of the sterility of the intelligence apparatus we have now and their reluctance to even suggest this kind of thing. But when you say Putin is willing to negotiate, that's a real deal. He is willing to negotiate. He's going to be president now for at least 5 or 6 more years. Okay. So, in my view, that is a very good thing, because if you look at his possible replacements, they're going to say, Vladimir Vladimirovich, you are really dumb not to go into Ukraine in 2014 when we were so provoked, and now 14,000 plus civilians killed in Donbass, and now all this other carnage. You should have done it then when there was no Ukrainian army, and you were diddled by Minsk and all this other stuff. And now the people that negotiated Minsk are laughing at you. This is the kind of people who come in if Putin is not around. He's very, very strong now, but as I said before, he has to worry a lot about what these people around Biden and what Biden himself might be capable of doing, not only strategically, but to prevent themselves from ending up in jail if Trump comes in and uses all the ammunition that he certainly has to proceed against them in a judicial way. And that must be bothering them right now. And that's something that, as I say, not only Putin, but Xi and even the people in the Middle East have to worry about. This is an unstable administration. And that in itself, per se, invites questioning and the kind of unexpected moves by various parties that could do us all in.
Ray, with these new changes that are happening right now in Europe, we have leaders from the right, from the left. They are all against the war in Ukraine and sending more aid weapons to Ukraine. Are these new leaders capable of putting some pressure on the United States to change its policy on Ukraine?
I think they are. And when you have Hungary and Slovakia and even the Czech Republic, yeah, there's a measure of pressure there. On the other hand, you have people like the UK, which is really a vassal supreme and will support whatever Washington wants to do. But more operative, in my view, Nima, is the US Congress. The House will not approve aid to Ukraine. The Senate, Chuck Schumer, Senate leader, has canceled Christmas vacations for his staff. They're going to all hang around so that, in his view, he can pressure them into approving aid, at least for Israel. Okay. And then the House is taking vacation. When the House comes back in January, they will be faced, if Schumer has his way, with a choice between nixing, deleting aid for Israel, which is a big political thing in our country, and Ukraine doesn't even play into this, okay? So situation on the ground, as I see it, is just as when Congress acted on Vietnam. It even acted on Central America and said, no more money. Well, that's it, okay? Now, there are ways around, and I'm told that there's enough money around to last till January or February before there's really no money. But the handwriting is on the wall, so to speak. And how things work out in Kiev, I would have thought that Zaluzhny or one of these other guys would be a more sensible person. But the neocons in Washington seem to have picked Zelensky. Look, you're still our guy. And if I'm right in my surmise or my speculation that they have a plan, a secret plan, some kind of false flag thing to change things around, to bring victory out of the jaws of defeat, so to speak. My God, they're going to do that, and you hold on to your hat. I don't know what it would be, but there's some possibilities I can explicate next time we talk.